I'm Einar Pontén, and Lipum, we are a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company, and our lead candidate is SOL-116. It's a fully humanized monoclonal antibody, and we have our roots in research at Umeå University, and the company was founded 2010, and we were listed on Nasdaq First North in April 2021. And just about a month ago, we were successfully enough we could start our first in human clinical trial. So with evaluation of our first in class antibody. And this study is randomized, placebo-controlled safety study. Obviously, it's a single ascending dose study. And we evaluate then the safety and the tolerance in the first instance of SOL-116. We will also monitor the pharmacokinetics, and this is done on groups of 8 people, up to 6 groups of healthy volunteers. 2 of them will get placebo and 6 get the active drug, and between each group we increase the dosing. But the last group will be a group of RA patients, and they are included in our sort of explorative endpoint in this study. We want to study the biomarker or the target molecule, and we will also study other pro-inflammatory biomarkers. So what should SOL-116 do then? First of all, I was thinking about one thing we have actually forgotten, and that is a clinical study should have a fancy name. So I decided now we will call this Sunshine study, because we have the SOL-116. But this antibody has been designed to block a protein called bile salt stimulated lipase. For short, it's BSSL. And it's an overlooked target in the inflammatory process. It stimulates the migration of monocytes that maintains and promotes the inflammation in a chronic way. And we have demonstrated in numerous preclinical studies that if we neutralize this protein, we can also stop the inflammation. But to get to this point, and I think this is another overlooked thing, especially for investors on the stock market. Okay, fine, they started a clinical trial, but then it's forgotten how did they came to this situation. So in Lipum case, the company was based on 30 years of research at the university. In 2010, the company was founded, and they started one of these tracks, the preclinical track, to evaluate, to validate that this target molecule was interesting. And to do so, there was a need of antibodies. So in the first instance, simple experimental antibodies are produced. And this is an interaction back and forth until the decision in 2016 to develop a drug candidate. And luckily, we had support of SciLife Lab and could move on and develop 5 candidates that were evaluated for 1 year before we decided that SOL-116 should be the lead candidate. And then we started the cell line development by a partner, and then production development. And at some point in the production development, you have enough material, you can start tox studies. So then the safety study started. And then in the end, when you get approval to start clinical trial, all these processes have been validated and accepted. And the cost was around about 150 million SEK. So now we look ahead to a very exciting future. But this would be possible unless we had an extremely experienced and nice team. And Lipum is having 5 full-time employees, and we have 5 sort of permanent consultants with expertise in the different areas we need to manage. But It's also a need for capital, of course, and in October we could announce that we had raised 39 million SEK in a directed share issue, a transaction cost 2.3% at the current share price at the stock market that day. And after that issue, we are essentially controlled by 4 major shareholder groups, holding around about 68% of the shares in Lipum. The opportunities we see are in rheumatoid arthritis, and that is our lead indication. But we are also exploring the opportunities with other related diseases where there is a high medical need, and that is Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and SLE. But in the same time, we have identified also another group, this expand indication 2, where diseases where you have an inflammatory component that we, in a bit of opportunistic way, explore when we get the chance. So we spend some resources, maybe on a preclinical study or something, looking into the opportunities we have there. But our focus is on the lead indication and expand indications number 1. But let's have a deeper look then on the RA market. Today it's valued to around about $27 billion. And it's projected to be $29 billion in 2029. So it's not particularly high growth rate, but it will still continue to grow. Around about 4.5 million patients in the 7 largest market have RA, and 30% of them get advanced biologics. And this is dominated by the anti-TNF biologics. Today it's the original drugs, but in the US this year they are introduced biosimilars of for instance, Humira from AbbVie. And these biosimilars, they are advanced, they are cheaper, but they are still quite expensive, so the market will not shrink. The market will continue to grow because they're high priced and more patients will get the treatment. And biosimilars, they are not chemically identical to the original drug. They should have the same features, they should have the same behavior. That means that they also have the same drawbacks. And one criteria to evaluate the treatment of an RA patient is the RCR scoring. And RCR 50 is the 50% improvement during treatment. And in fact, the statistics shows that less than 40% of the patients get a 50% improvement in 6 months. So there is still a medical need for better treatment. On top of that, around about 30% of the patients are non-responders, so they have no effect at all. And just now, during the last year, there has been a phase 4 after on-market evaluation of the alternative treatment with the JAK inhibitors. And then it was found that there are actually rather serious side effects from these JAK inhibitors that should have been an alternative to the anti-TNF drugs. So both FDA and EMA have issued new box warnings during this last year. So the future of the JAK inhibitors is more ambiguous right now. So that means that we have more biosimilars sold in 2029. They take market from the original drugs, but they will have the same limitations. So when we show effect in a forthcoming phase 2 study, we are sure that SOL-116 has the potential to become a blockbuster and sell for more than $1 million annually. So our strategy then for creating value is to continue now as fast as possible with the clinical program, with the safety study, obviously, with the SAD study, maybe a MAD study, and then enter into a phase 2 proof of concept study. Meanwhile, we spend more resources, we have lab personnel, we have lab resources ourselves to evaluate the mode of action and to evaluate the opportunities we have in other indications. And I'm pretty convinced then that combining data from this work together with the partnering activities that we do have with several Swedish universities, both ongoing and planned, based on that, I'm pretty sure that we will gather an interest, accumulate an interest for the future, and very great business opportunities for Lipum to the benefit of the shareholders. Thank you.
As you mentioned, you have started your Sunshine study. Have you noticed an increased interest from potential partners in the business?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely we have. I mean, I've been working with Lipum since 2016, and I visited numerous of industry events and activities like this for partnering, and all in the beginning, of course, having a new target molecule in such a huge area, it was they were sort of surprised and amazed. But today it's a very serious interest, in particular then since we started the clinical trial, or was about to start the clinical trial, because it becomes more real. Otherwise, you know how it is. If you have a professor, you have a project, you are in preclinical phase. You can be that for 50 years. But once you are starting a clinic, then you actually validate it somehow.
Okay, and if we turn the question around, what are you looking for in a partner?
What we are looking for what we already get, actually.
Okay.
Because the attitude among the scouts in the larger companies is that they want to be part of our process, and they want to learn more about it, to contribute, and to provide us with ideas, guidelines, so to speak. What do they want to see? So what do they expect us to do? And that's very efficient if we can, because there's a lot of interesting things you can do in science, but it's better to do what the market actually asks for. So we already have that dialogue, and I think that is very constructive and productive for us. And in the long run, it will be cost efficient. And for them, it's the benefit for them is, of course, that they keep updated. And if something happens, they will probably learn about it.
Would you be able to elaborate a little bit on the role of this BSSL in the some of the EXPAND-2 indications, such as NASH, diabetes?
Yeah, happy to do that. I mean, obviously we have not full picture of the mode of action, but we have a lot of knowledge. And what we do know is that the BSSL molecule it's transported in the neutrophils, and when it's released, it activates monocyte and monocyte migration and differentiation. And that is what maintains. You can see in migration studies, you can see that this is what happens. But why do we have NASH on the list, for instance? Yeah, well, in the very early stage, when the founders found that BSSL could be involved in inflammatory processes, they were not knowing where it was produced. It's produced in the mammary glands, so it's in breast milk. That was known. But when they found it in the circulation, it couldn't be transported from the breast milk to the circulation. So nowadays we know it's formed in pancreas, but they didn't know at that time, and they thought it would produced in the liver. So they got liver samples from colleagues, studied them, and some liver samples they found very elevated levels of BSSL molecule, and that turned out to be patients that were suffering from fatty liver disease. And that is in an inflammatory condition. So for that reason, we think that it's interesting to have that on the list, and in an opportunistic way, continue to monitor the opportunities there. They also studied atherosclerotic plaque, and then it was seen that if you have plaque, you have elevated level of the BSSL molecule as well. So that is another reason why, because plaque is related to heart failures, to stroke, and things like that. So for that reason, it's interesting to monitor.
Okay, I have a question to the study design. I think you said it was a single-dose study.
Yeah.
So how do you manage that when you get into the patient cohort? Do you wash them out, or is it mild patients with mild symptoms, or?
No, I mean, they would get the same dosing as the last group of healthy volunteers, but they are naive on biologics, but they do get the methotrexate.
Okay, so methotrexate will stay throughout.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
We've been following Lipum since you were, well, not listed.
Freshly born.
Freshly born, and it's been a pleasure. Seeing as you are now a maturing company, you're going to later phases and will then obviously be needing more capital. In the current market climate, how do you tackle that challenge in securing the capital that you need going forward?
Yeah, I can. I mean, that's the being a CEO of a life science company. We just closed the last directed share issue, and that is the board that do that final decision. And once they did it, they immediately started to talk about the next financing round. So that is, of course, how you need to do it and tackle it. Yeah, you work hard and you start early. I think that is the way to tackle it. And you make sure that your corporate finance firm are on alert from the first minute. Aren't you?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.